A group of former senior directors for counterterrorism at the National Security Council released a statement addressing the shootings, saying that in part it has become abundantly clear over many months now that more must be done to address acts of violence driven by extremist views of all types, including acts of domestic terrorism. We call on our government to make addressing this form of terrorism as a high priority as countering international terrorism has become since 9/11. We simply cannot wait any longer. So one of the authors of that statement joins me now, is the former senior director for counterterrorism at the National Security Council, Javed Ali. You're joining me on the phone, Javed. Thank you very much. Authorities have said that the 21-year-old accused of killing 20 people in El Paso will be treated as a domestic terrorist. Often when we see these shootings, people sort of, scream, call it what it is. It's terrorism. It's terrorism. And though they may be terrorizing people who are, sort of gunning down others in parking lots, it's not always terrorism. So explain to us why the El Paso shooting can be called terrorism.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and good to be here this morning. So with regards to the statement that me and my colleagues put out yesterday, we certainly wanted to put more of an emphasis for the government to take more action on this particular threat. And with respect to the charge that's been levied, it is indeed a federal charge that fits under U.S. Code 18, Section 2331. And in that, there's a multi-part definition of what constitutes an act of terrorism for the federal law to apply. And subsection 5 of that piece of code actually spells out the criteria for what would constitute legally a domestic terrorist act. So in the course of the investigation in El Paso over the past 24, 48 hours, the local FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Texas, they came to the determination that they had enough evidence to levy that charge. Now, whether that charge proceeds further through the Justice Department and into the trial phase, we'll see how that goes. They could also levy additional charges. But that to me was very sort of telling that this quickly, both through the local U.S. attorney and the local FBI, they were able to comfortably put that federal domestic terrorist charge to the El Paso shooter.
So what do we know about the alleged shooter's motivation in this case, and also how his motivation may be connected to other shootings?
So the motivation for that attack was spelled out by the shooter's manifesto that he provided online in 8chan. Hopefully 8chan is now going to be knocked down. But that manifesto seemed to connect to other manifestos that have been issued unfortunately, with other acts of white supremacist terrorism or white nationalist terrorism. So the El Paso shooter referenced an ideological sort of motivation to the Christchurch, New Zealand attacker through that person's manifesto, Brenton Tarrant. Brenton Tarrant, the Christchurch, New Zealand attacker, referenced the Anders Breivik attack in 2011 in Norway as the basis, or one of the bases, for his ideological motivation. So the fact these manifestos are out there, that these attackers feel the need to draft them before the attack and then post them right before they are actually going to conduct the attack, that's a disturbing aspect of this particular threat.
This is not the first time that 4chan has come up in connection with a crime, a mass shooting in particular. Do we know how the creator of 4chan, or 8chan rather, feels about this? Any thoughts about whether or not they would consider shutting down the website because it's being used as a forum for this sort of conversation?
I believe the New York Times yesterday actually did a really good piece of reporting that interviewed the actual creator of 8chan. His name escapes me right now, but he is apparently in the Philippines. He, according to the New York Times report, is very much opposed to the use, the current use of 8chan. This apparently was not his original intent when he designed the platform, but the ownership, I guess, of 8chan has migrated to a different individual who, according to the New York Times report, also lives in the Philippines, and that person based on the reporting, seems to indicate that he is not inclined, on his own anyways, to take the site down or the platform down. But with the Cloudflare decision, basically not to offer any sort of protection to that site, it may make it difficult for them to stay up. But all that said, even if 8chan goes offline, so to speak, there will likely be other alternative content platforms for this kind of toxic and incendiary ideology and material to exist. They may be active right now, we just don't know about them. And so this is part of the problem, is we're always going to be constantly sort of chasing these alternative content sites and trying to figure out a way to take that content down or regulate it or get sort of the tech industry involved. And this is going to be an ongoing aspect of this particular fight.
And when do you start to sort of trample on, protected speech? I mean, you may think it's vile, it may be violent, but it's still protected speech on any one of these, websites. So where do you draw the line?
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly in our country, we have lots of history and protection with First Amendment protected speech. But from a law enforcement perspective and a counterterrorism perspective, the moment that speech starts trending in the direction of actually sort of manifesting into some type of potential threat or an actual operational threat, that's where the enforcement action should take place, either in terms of disrupting an attack that might happen or taking the content offline. So I do think there's certainly a room for that kind of speech, however vile we may think it is. But at the same time, once it crosses a legal threshold or it tips over into that type of speech seems to be trending in the direction of an actual attack plotting, that I think is the moment for the enforcement action to take place.
All right, Javed, thank you very much.
Thank you.